Hello again. I am Erica. This is AJ Dudley, and we are here today to talk more about Raven Crest. Today we're going to be specifically honing in on her first book, The Feather. So let's jump right in. Angela, start by talking about the prologue, because this is one of my favorite prologues I've ever read. Why was it so important, and what inspired you to write it as you did?
Whew. Okay, the prologue was probably the most rewritten part of the entire book because it's very long, and I thought no one wants to read this. So I would rewrite, and then it would get shortened, and then it was like, this isn't what it needs to be. So I would rewrite again, it would be long. And so at the end of it, we had thrown it out at one point, just completely threw it out.
What?
Because I thought people won't get past this prologue and they'll never read the book.
You need it, Angela.
So we finally decided to put it in. It's really important because it sets up the kind of the undercurrent story behind the beginning of the story. It talks a little bit about the two realms that we live in, the physical and the spiritual. And so I think it's setting that up because the story has both flowing throughout.
Sure.
And so it begins in the beginning with God in the beginning. And so it really does kind of takes us all the way back in time to begin kind of shaping an understanding of where everything all began and why the pull and the drive of this undercurrent story in the spiritual realm is so impacting what's happening in the story we're experiencing in the physical. So that was kind of why we thought we needed it, so you understand.
For sure. And you certainly see that actually played out all the way through the book. That's a common theme that you have going. Let's talk about the capitalized words.
Yes. Okay. So when you read the prologue, you understand that there's a great war going on in this spiritual realm, and we feel that. We feel the tension of war. I think everyone, even today, we feel that there's this battle for our hearts and against us, and also for us. And so in the story, there's words that you might think just are common words, like fear. That might just be a feeling, but in the story, they're capitalized because they're not. They're taken as a spiritual being that is fighting against us. Sure. And the impact that it has when it steps into the room, when it kind of sweeps over you, when it wraps you up in a heavy cloak of doubt or depression, and that it's somehow a power of its own.
Yeah, a character of its own.
A character of its own. And I think even in the things that we struggle with and deal with today, sometimes we feel like it's just us and we don't know why we're this way, instead of understanding it's our battle and it's something that's coming against us. Right. And so there's a way to deal with it if we know that there's something besides just us.
Right. And so you're not crazy.
But
this is something that's real and tangible in the spiritual realm and impacting the physical realm of the characters that we see. And just as you have the negative forces coming at you, you also then emphasize the hopeful ones, the good. So, hope, mercy, grace, some of those characters, strength, I'm trying to think, love, and those were really cool to see at play as well. So not to give too much away.
So there's a few of our characters.
Yeah, there's a few. But as far as named characters, like real people characters, let's dive in and talk about some of those, because the first book is it is a lot of exposition. I would compare it to like The Hobbit, as you have to know the entire realm, the entire world that these characters are living in before they can they can go on their quest and they can have their story play out. That's really important for the audience member. And so we get introduced to so many characters. We get introduced to the Isle of Man, and the setting and everything that comes along with exposition. So some of my favorite characters were, let's start with Maria. Okay. Maria, go ahead. Just talk about her. Who is she? What is her role and where was your heart in writing her?
Okay. Well, she is a little bit of a mystery, actually. She's kind of known within the context of some characters with different labels that don't seem to make sense. People note that right away, and they're like, how could she be the daughter, the niece, the aunt? That doesn't fit. And it's one of those people, and we probably all have people like that in our life that gets a family title that maybe wasn't born into particularly that one, but they did an uncle that's not really uncle. And so her story is a bit of a mystery for quite a while as far as who she is and where she comes from. But as the story begins, she's in her early 20s, two children. Her husband is a sailor and he's off sailing. And I mean, he's a merchant ship captain. So she's just, she's very alone. You see her, kind of this lonely heart, not necessarily lonely, sad, depressed, but just alone. So like this solitary person, there's a lot of internal stuff going on. And she shows up as a wet nurse in the castle to take care of a newborn princess. And so there's this, I guess, relational experience with her as a foster mom. I guess that would be the best explanation of how you see her heart. She's a mom of her biological children, and you see that dynamic, but then she's a foster mom to the princess, and you see that dynamic and the differences. Right. And there are differences, and there must be, and there's a tension there, and that's hard. And anybody who's been a foster parent, or anybody who's been a foster child, because you hear the heart of this little girl, you see her development. And so there's this, you see the tension, the sweetness of her character, and yet this tension of the things that have to be that she just wished they didn't.
Of course. Her sincere love toward the princess, and not quite being able to express all of it, wanting the relationship to be more than it is, and it simply can't be because of the circumstances.
And she's a very raw character, because
she is.
The first part of the book, there's part 1, 2, and 3, and the first part of the book it's really her journal entries is a portion of that. And so you really get raw heart of her, where she's just like, I don't like this, like, and like, I'm angry, like, you get this rawness where she has a vulnerability towards, her audience, and her journal is probably most likely God, because she talks to him a lot in the journal. And so you just get this very raw honesty that you don't get in normal conversation with people. Right. And so you see into her heart.
You empathize with her more. You're like, oh, you're a person. I get that feeling, even if I'm not a foster mom per se of a princess in 1520. But but you understand her immediately. That's a really cool way to that you did throughout the story, just incorporating the letters. And I think that's really keeps the audience's attention. So let's move on to a different character. Can we just talk about Jamin?
Yeah,
I love him so much.
Jamin's like the perfect dad, like the one that everybody's like, that's what I wish my dad was like just, and at the same time, he's the dad that devastates a heart, so it's like, oh, even the perfect dad, can crush your heart, and unintentionally. And so but at the same time, he is the father, God the Father revelation, like this is what does the heart of God the Father look like? Just look at Jamin. Right. And he's wise, he's just very intelligent, very kind, so knowledgeable, very gentle. The one that you just feel so safe with, like whatever decision he makes, it's going to be the right one. Right. And you just, want to curl up in his lap and like the world is all okay when he's around. Right.
You feel a deep sense of rest, and you see his character have to make some really hard decisions. But I think what I admire about him is his consistent heart for the whole. He is a member of Raven Crest.
Yes.
And you don't want to give too much away, of course, but I think, just seeing how he handles making decisions and weighing the costs
Yeah.
you know, because sacrifice is needed, but seeing the whole picture and almost having that foresight to do what is right, even though it's super hard for him and his whole family.
Yes. He's one of the most genuine. I mean, there's a rawness and a realness to all the characters.
I was going to say,
he's got such a genuine like goodness to him.
Yeah.
Kind of like the Dumbledore Gandalf sort of.
Yeah.
They're just, you know, you just can trust them to be good and to be wise, and you lean into them to fix things. And so he really has that heart, but he really does have to suffer, and it's, you know, there's no way around it no matter how wise you are. Sure. And yet it can be a choosing. And I think one of the neat things that I learned these things after, like with this story, I think I've mentioned before that this story came to me as a vision. And so much of what I saw, I just am trying to write and develop for people. But when I later learn how these characteristics are so, I don't know how to describe it, but like, I watch a lot of Jordan Peterson, and he talks about, we're all going to suffer, but we can choose to suffer, and we can choose it for a purpose. Yeah. And so, Jamin has that quality. He chooses his suffering, and it has a purpose, and it changes. It's different. You know, it's different than the kind of suffering where you look at yourself as a victim. Right. And we look at Christ and we say, you were, you know, as if he was a victim. He was not obviously a victim. Sure. He chose it, and it served a purpose. Like Christ, you know, Jamin had a role to play in the greater story, and he had a very keen awareness of that role and what needed to be done to fulfill it. Yes. And that's, I think, it's just admirable. You see characters like that and you're like, oh, man, Lord, give me the strength to be that kind of person. Yeah. It's someone who has a vision for this life and what they would have it. But they have a vision for God's heart, and they're seeking always for his version of their life. And so, he has a view into the larger story, a view into the spiritual realm, and there's something much bigger going on out there. And so, because he does, you know, he holds his vision a lot lighter than he holds the one that God has. But it's just like Christ, you know, not my will, but yours be done. He had a will of his own, but he was willing to surrender. And that's a huge, it's admirable, but it also is, gives such meaning and purpose to life. And it's something that we all can do. And so, it's just, I love his character, of course. He's absolutely. So let's transition to Jamin's son, Nick, who is, I mean, I would say the protagonist, the one of the main characters that you follow. And you watch as a boy, and you watch him grow up. And so you become very attached. I became very attached to Nick. Yeah. To all of them, let's be real. But to Nick specifically, because you really do get a view into his world all throughout. Yeah. So what are some just key points about Nick? Like, what did you want to really, what did you want to convey to the audience through Nick's character? I think the entire heart of the whole story, because Nick it's like one of those things where you feel like in life you're not really the main character, and you go about your life as, you know, kind of watching sometimes and things happening sometimes, but at the end of the day, in your story, you are the main character. And it doesn't mean that you are in the bigger picture, but in the story itself, it really is Nick's story. Even though he seems like one of the main characters, it really is Nick's story. Yeah. The whole thing is all about Nick. But it can't be all about Nick, you know, because like it never really is just us. And so I guess with Nick, he's the one I identify with most. I identify with so many of the characters. I am a foster mom. So Maria, you know, it's like that like I felt that heart as I saw that vision. I was like, oh, I get it. You know, and I think all of it, I resonated with a lot of the characters, but Nick in particular, because he represents so much more of a deeper goodness from the beginning that gets very lost. and just this wanting to find your way home even on the days you don't. And like that's really the journey is Nick's, it's about Nick and it's about home. Like I'd say that's the heart of it.
And that's the end of the
how do you get him there? And like, and that's us. Like how do we, that's it. It's me and home. It's you and home. And how do we get there? And what is home? And so I think there's times where you get really, you just want to smack him upside the face. And but you love him.
Right.
You just love him.
And simultaneously you kind of see yourself in his shoes anyway, and you're like, I get it. Like I can't blame you for doing that.
And there's seasons in his life where he's like Braveheart character, where he's just wild. He's unpredictable, wild, and you're like, what has happened to you? And yet
and the story's all about him, so it's like you have to survive a little longer, right?
Yeah. Like don't die yet. So,
well, you've said that beautifully. That it is him, and it's finding his way home.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts? I'm sorry, I feel like I cut you off.
Oh, on Nick. I have so many, but I can't give them away.
Sure.
You have to read it. And it's that kind of discovering. It's kind of that picking away and discovering Nick's heart throughout all of the books. Like that'll be the main thing is like those glimpses and relating and unearthing like what's going on in there. And that's what's going on in my heart too. Like, in these situations. So, I think Nick just kind of wiggles his way into your heart. I hope so. I mean, most people who read the first book fall in love with Arabella. She's just who they resonate with because they feel her pain. But and a lot of people get confused about Nick. Like, what is your problem? Get over it.
Right.
You got a great life. Like,
exactly.
But they're you don't miss in Arabella's life the spiritual war. In Nick's, it comes more subtly, and so it's sometimes missed, and then you're just being a spoiled brat. There's a real war waged against him.
Sure.
I mean, he is the main character, so
it's almost
the war
as if
is against him,
right?
And yet it's
as
like
if the enemy knows what God might have up his sleeve in his plan for Nick.
Yeah. So even though it comes subtly in his life, his is the more genuine beginning. His is the more deeper understanding of goodness and home, and the characters that surround his beginning.
Yeah, his parents are part of Raven Crest. He has his community,
his godfather, like all of them, everybody. He's just like meshed in this bubble of goodness in his youth, and to the point where the beginning may seem slow in the development. It's like with Nick, you're like, life is just good for him every day. Like,
sure.
And it's like, it's almost not as entertaining as you want it to be. Where's the drama? But he does have his things that wound deeply, even in the beginning. So, you just have to be willing to hear that and catch it. And maybe if you are a little boy who misses his father, who feels like he's chosen something besides you, maybe you'll understand him better than the next guy.
Sure. And then someone who does have drama surrounding her is Arabella. And you get your fix of that throughout her storyline.
Yeah.
In the first book. And like you said, Arabella is the princess who was born to parents who really don't want her.
No, to a world that doesn't want her. No one in the world wants her. Yes. Let's just say that.
Yes.
She is the epitome of disappointment in her world.
In her land, yeah.
That was, that's hard to start with.
Because she was born a female.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Simply.
And so to live with the weight of that from a young age.
And what that looks like. Like, what does that look like in relationship from each different character?
Sure.
To kind of already be born guilty, of just being a disappointment. You're just not what we wanted. And so, and the level of disappointment each person feels, that's the kind of the level of harshness and ugliness towards her. And just, it's hard. Her life is hard.
Yeah.
And you feel her, I think, again, more than any other character in the first book, you really feel her.
Yeah.
Because she's she struggles.
Yeah.
And every time something looks up, it just, as Jamin describes it, it's like taking her up a ladder just to watch her fall. Like he just,
That's
it's
right.
just very,
You cry with her and for her. It's devastating to see the things that she goes through.
right.
So yeah, we have a lot of characters and a lot of dynamics going on in this book. How long did it take you from start to finish, create this?
Oh my. Okay. Well, I would say people ask how long did it take you to write, and writing was like 3 weeks. It was so fast, but it took about, 8 years of study, research and then as far as, continued development, I think that I had gone to the Isle of Man in 2014, wrote a little bit there, came home, kind of took a month off, wrote the rest of it. So it was like a week and a half, book was done. And then, so from 2014 till December 2017 before we were ready to publish.
Oh my gosh.
So, and then that was just the first version that we said, wait, there's things missing. Like we want to throw some more maps in there. We really want to throw this scene. We missed this scene. Like, so we actually, the edition 2 just came out this fall. So it took a lot of years to really get.
You went back to the Isle of Man in the meantime.
I did. Yep. I was there 6 weeks studying, and then wrote, and then I went back 2 years later when we were, maybe 4 years later, when we were going to the London Book Show and wanted to go back and study for the second book. So did some, promotion in the island, and then, but I plan to be back a lot. That's now like that island. If you read this book and don't fall in love with that island, there's something wrong. And I did. And it becomes what home looks like, that it's like a Hobbit village, the entire country. It's like, you just want to be there, you want to set off fireworks with Gandalf,
and throw a festival.
Yeah. Party. It's just, there's a part of my heart that's there. And, the time that I spent there really, it enabled me to experience a place, so that when I wrote, that's what you're reading about a place that's real. It's like I went to Hogwarts and you like lived in it for 6 weeks, and you came back and wrote about it. And then people go and they're like, oh, it's all there. So if you ever go to the Isle of Man, you're going to feel as if you're walking through the story, because it's like one of the other characters. And then the legend, we talked a little bit in the beginning about the prologue. And you see a bit the introduction into the island, and all of the legends and the fairy stories and the stories of St. Patrick, and all of that is, you walk through the island, and that's like literally that's how they live. You go by the ferry bridge, you go to like the history museum is like all about Manannan, like the fairy god. Like, so it's like really the place is magical.
Wow.
And you see all of that spiritual warfare, and it's their history. You're like, I came here for history. Like, it's the spiritual history of their island and what you're going to experience. It's so cool. So it really helped set up that whole prologue too, and like bring from the beginning down to like the setting for the story on a spiritual aspect, because in everything we ever saw is actually real, Right. But here's what it really looks like. And so it's just such a magical place. The castles are just as the castles were. And there's a scene, probably one of my favorite things. I think if I was reading it and then went on a tour of the island, that I would be like, there's a prison cell where a character's being held, and he cries out, and it sounds like the Morty Dew, the legendary like bear-like dog moaning, and it's coming out of that cell. When you walk through the island, the cell is there, and in the castle, and there's a statue of the dog, the bear-like dog of the Morty Dew, and the legend of Morty Dew, and the plaque. And,
that's amazing. So it's actually there.
Yeah,
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
what?
So it's like it's so cool. You like walk past the cell, and you're like, oh, there's no Jamin, but there's the Morty Dew. It's so cool. So yeah, I feel like you'll be walking down street corners looking for the characters.
Unbelievable. Wow. I know. I can't wait to go. We'll go together. Well, AJ, thank you so much for sitting down and just talking about this. I'm her friend, and I still love to just sit down and hear her talk about it.
Thank you so much for being there and letting me talk and letting me share with everyone, because the stories mean so much to me, and it's just, it's been inside for so long. So it's nice to get to share.
It's become a way of life, definitely.
Yes.
But you know what else is that this is going to make a great Christmas present. I think my mom's bought like 6 or 7 of them and has been distributing them out as Christmas gifts. I know I gave 2 to my mom and my sister last year, but it does make a great gift. So if you would like to purchase one, you can go to ravencrestpublishingandproduction.com or amazon.com.
And your local bookstores should be able to order them as well. If you want to support local, that's always great too.
Hey.
And we also have the audiobook that we're working on, so it will probably be quite a few months still before that's finished. Book 2 is underway in editing stages. There's also on the webpage, the Raven Crest Publishing and Production is the only place that you can get this. But if you have already read this book and you want a little taste more while you're waiting for book 2, there is a short story, a very short story, but it's a really cute story about the raven in the emblem.
Yes.
And it's called Base.
I highly recommend it. And artwork by your daughter.
Yes.
Amazing.
She did a good job.
It's really incredible just to see all the talents coming together. So I think that's all we have for today. Thank you so much for being here, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Yep. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.